Well, hello everyone. My name is Brian DiNapoli. I'm one of the co-hosts to the Drug Free Lumpkin podcast. This is our third podcast and very happy to have you all here. We're exploring the critical topic of preventing youth substance use in Lumpkin County, Georgia, also known as Dahlonega. Very excited about this podcast as a consultant with Drug Free Lumpkin in a project that's very close to my heart. I had a problem with alcohol in my teens and my 20s. And when I finally quit for good, great things in my life happened. So very happy to be here. And my co-host, Dr. Carpenter, Mike Carpenter, will introduce himself. He has decades of experience and unique viewpoints to add to this conversation. So before we introduce our guests, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carpenter. How are you, Mike?
Good morning. I'm doing well, thank you. I started in the area of suicide prevention and moved from that, always staying in the area of drug prevention, and then actually became a national, international trainee in bullying prevention. So they all seem to have a connection of what we're doing. And of course, it impacts people's lives and youth and adults. So I'm I live in the Atlanta area, and Brian and I both work in a area about north of Atlanta, and the name of the city is called Dahlonega, and it's called Lumpkin County, and we're there because the youth drug use was high, and DBHDD, the state organization that funds different counties, chose 40 counties in Georgia for us to start working with. And we've been with Lumpkin County for about 2.5 years, and we're in there for at least 2.5 more years. And even looking at a sustainability of pulling in and being a drug-free community, which goes 10 more years. So we know that this does take time. And what we're very engaged with is getting to know the community and getting to know people that impact the community and to get their ideas on what they're doing and what they're seeing and how we together can work as a team. So to start off, I want to mention a couple of points that are always coming out when I'm talking to parents or others, and it happens to be on the number one drug that we're working with, and that's alcohol. A lot of people forget all about alcohol. First of all, they're calling it alcohol and other drugs, and alcohol is a drug. So what is going on with alcohol? In this great article, it was saying some myths. And I think the myths I'll just start off with by just giving people some education, if they don't know it, about what I hear from parents say about some myths. One myth is that parents believe that it's safer for kids to experience alcohol in the safety of their home. And unfortunately, these influences range from a permissive view or attitude of parents towards drinking and directly offering alcohol to a child. And we, of course, are saying it's not good to offer your kid that's got an underdeveloped brain alcohol at an early age. The second myth is parents think letting their children drink at home will keep them safer since they won't be drinking. And here you go again. Alcohol impaired driving accounts for 1 in 3 underage drinking deaths. So we're very concerned about what parents are doing and not doing. And the third myth about parents is parents believe that since the legal age is 18 in some countries, it's okay for their teens to drink before 21. And as we said, the underdeveloped brain, the brain is developing into the 20s, sometimes the upper 20s, and putting something that's going to impact their brain while developing is not a good thing to do. So just kind of keying on some of those things. And we have a wonderful guest that Brian is going to introduce you to now. And we're so glad that she's joining us. And she's part of a sector representative in Lumpkin County. and she comes about this from a different perspective than others. So we're so glad to have you, Brian.
Thank you, Mike. Excellent insight. Well, we know the opposite of addiction is connection. And I met our guest, I guess, a couple months ago at a community event, one of the first community events I went to in Dahlonega. And I could tell right away that she's a connector, and I love to be a connector too. When I meet someone, I'm thinking, who do I know that can help them become successful or help them in their job? And I really felt like she is a person that does that. She has a lot of different projects going on. Very interesting person. We share some with passions for college football and some other things we talked about. So, Megan, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and your agency you work with, and what is your passion for helping young people? What drove you to helping young people and victims of domestic violence?
So I started working at NOAA when I was fresh out of college. It was my first job. I love this job. I love being able to help people, and it's important because I do preventative work. So what that means is I go into elementary schools, I go into high schools, I go to middle schools, and I talk to them a little bit about boundaries, healthy relationships, how to say no, bullying, and how those can all impact you and how they can eventually lead to domestic violence in your later years. And early intervention is so huge and it's so important. It's important to me because I grew up in a household where my father was an abusive alcoholic, and it was really hard. Um, I didn't realize that it wasn't okay for you to come home and, get beat with a belt or your parents to fight the way they did. I just thought it was normal. And then growing up, I started to see that in my own relationships. And I had a really hard time, figuring out what's okay for my partner to do and how is it okay for me to interact with my partners. So that's why this is a passion project for me. That's why it's so important for me. I could talk for days about domestic violence and how it's important to understand boundaries and how it's important to communicate effectively with your partners. I also later on in college ended up getting into a pretty bad relationship. We almost got married, and thankfully I was able to see that no, this is not the right relationship for me. I don't need to be with this person. And that's why this work is so important for me, because I want to be able to mentor young women or men, that are experiencing something like this so that we can stop the cycle, because it is a cycle. And a lot of times there is drugs, there's alcohol, there's all these different factors that lead into it. And if you can do the prevention work, you can keep it from ever happening in the first part, or you can help break the cycle at an earlier age.
So your passion seems to come about because of your young life as
Yeah.
you're growing up and everything. And how's that passion changed you as you've become more of a, I would say, adult, or a little, maybe a few years older?
It has changed because I didn't understand the ramifications of what was going on at home. I thought it was normal. I thought that this is just what happens, you act up and you get spanked. I didn't understand the severity of what was going on until I started getting into therapy and I started to talk to people about what was going on at home. And when I started working at NOAA, I didn't understand domestic violence to the depth that I do now. So understanding that it is a cycle, that there are certain steps that you have to take to break that cycle. And it's been hard for me as a young adult with dating and recognizing the patterns that I'm attracted to and being like, okay, well, that's not healthy. And having to realize that a lot of times I get this feeling like, oh, that's exciting and I want to date this person. And then realizing, like, no, that is a toxic behavior, and that it's okay for relationships to not be exciting 24/7. And, you don't need to be fighting with your partner like that. And understanding how to communicate with somebody in such a level that is understanding and that you're not yelling at each other and it's not becoming physical. So it's really changed from even like, I remember in middle school, I had a boyfriend and we got in a fight and I slapped him and his mom came in and talked to me. And I was like, why are you talking to me? Like, this is completely normal. This is what happens. And it's not, it's really not what happens. So I love being able to talk to young people about what's going on in their life. And I can come to them in a very non-judgmental, standpoint, because I've been through that and I know what it looks like and I know what it feels like. So I can come to them with some understanding about what it feels like and how to get through it and how to process it and maybe how to overcome it at a younger age.
When you talk about this, something just happened in the United States, in our world, and it seems like that it's right down what you're talking about. But we don't know how people are in their life. We're not living with them. We don't know, but O.J. Simpson just died. And it appears that he was domestically abusing his wife, and no one knew that at the time. How does that work into all of this?
Do you mind clarifying that question?
So people, we don't know how many people are involved with domestic violence. People have a private life.
Yeah,
They may
exactly.
appear one way and they're not the other way. So it's difficult to figure that out, isn't it?
It is very difficult. Like my family, we were from the upper class family. We traveled out of the country all the time, even as me as a younger child. So if I did try to talk to people about it when I was a teenager, they'd be like, oh, well, your life's not so bad. Your life's not so bad. You get to do all these things. And, I just wanted somebody to hear me, and I never was heard. And I think a lot of times people just look at what's going on the outside and they don't take a moment to realize that just because this is the facade that I'm putting off, or this is the kind of lifestyle that I'm allowed to live, that doesn't mean that something else can't be going on. Just because my parents could afford to put me in therapy at a young age doesn't mean that there wasn't anything going on that didn't need to be addressed.
So where does it cross the line?
Where does what cross the line specifically?
Where does domestic violence kind of cross the line to be violent when you're in a relationship? And is it always physical? Because
No, it's not always
controlling.
physical. And that's what people don't understand is just because he's not putting his hands on me doesn't mean that it's not, domestic violence. What happened to me in college, like my boyfriend, he never hit me, but he was constantly threatening to kill me. He was constantly threatening to throw me down the stairs. He would tell me, like, belittle me and tell me how useless I was. And that was worse, in my opinion, because my self-worth dwindled so low. And I had the worst opinion of myself. And he was constantly telling me to go kill myself. And honestly, if I wasn't in therapy and I didn't have a therapist, I probably would have. So it's just really hard. Like that, the physical violence, it's over when it's done. And that is so much easier to deal with than constantly having this voice in your head telling you that you're ugly, you're worthless, you are, never going to be anything. So I feel like people just don't understand. They're like, well, that's not domestic violence, when someone's just being mean to you. It is, because you're constantly with this person. You constantly have to share space with this person. And this is the person that you rely on. This is the person that you're, supposed to be with. And they're supposed to be your confidant. And, it's just really hard and very isolating because people don't listen when it is not physical. Sometimes they just have a hard time understanding it if you've never been through it. So it's domestic violence it's very hard to talk about sometimes, and especially as a victim, and coming out and telling people, because you're always scared. Like, is somebody going to believe me just because he's not hitting me? And it's really hard also, because where I work, sometimes there's not much you can do until it becomes physical. So these women are, well, he's not hitting me, so it's not that bad. But like, you can't get a TPO against him unless you are being physically hit or you're being physically hurt. If he's actively threatening you and you have evidence of it, then there's something that you can do about it. But if there's no evidence of it, then it's just really hard for these women to get out of that sometimes, because he might come back and pull them back in and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'll never act like that again. And it's just a whole cycle of, you become dependent on this person and you don't know how to get out of it because you've been so isolated being with this person. You have nobody else. So it's hard, because it can be mental, it can be physical, it can be emotional. It can be a broad spectrum of different types of abuse.
What about controlling behavior? Can people be controlling and not be physical? And is that a key characteristic also of domestic violence?
Yes, absolutely. So control is probably, we have this thing called the power and control wheel. I wish I had it with me so I could show you, but it just goes over how the perpetrator of the abuse is constantly using their power and control to keep you within their grips. So controlling behavior could look like financial control. That one's really something that I see a lot of. She's not allowed to work, so she has to stay at home, and she doesn't have her own money. She doesn't have a title to the car. So the car, the house, no money, those are under his name, So she financially is dependent upon him. She can't do anything without asking him. Say, I needed to go to the store and get tampons, and he wouldn't let me. I've seen that happen a lot. Or, I need to get out and I need to leave, but I don't have a car. Well, I have a car that he lets me drive, but it's in his name. Can I take it with me? No, you can't, because technically the title is in his name. If you do that, he could, say that someone stole his car, and then that causes a whole other slew of issues. So getting women out of the household when he has all this different types of control over her, it is really hard. It's really difficult.
Well, we're very sorry this happened to you, Megan. However, you're turning that terrible experience and turning into something positive. So very grateful that you're giving back and doing this. And talk about during the pandemic, how domestic violence rates increased, and what percentage of victims of domestic violence would you say had an issue with substance abuse?
I think the increase was caused by, isolation again, because not only were you being isolated by that person, you're now being told by society you can't go out, you can't do anything. So now you're stuck 24/7 with this person in this house, and you can't do anything. You can't leave. So I think that's why rates significantly increased during the pandemic. And then from the research that I've done, I've seen that about 80% of all domestic violence cases have some form of drug abuse associated with it. So, and about 55% of that is alcohol abuse. So that doesn't mean one or the other, but it could be both. So it's a big percentage of alcohol abuse that goes into it. And then the women or whoever it is being abused, they have a 15% chance of what is it? A 15% chance of developing an alcohol or drug abuse dependency. Yes, thank you. Because they've been going through this abuse. And a lot of the reasons why I find this happening is escapism. You know, it's, I don't want to deal with this. I want to shut it off and I can't leave. So I'm just going to start drinking, or I'm just going to start doing drugs because that will at least numb it, you know, and I don't have to worry about it because it'll numb the pain. And we all know that is not a long-term solution to a problem. But it is what happens.
So I'm curious, because of being in bullying prevention,
Mhm.
how does this, how does this relate to bullying prevention? And if you'll also respond to, bullying can come from anyone.
Mhm.
I call bullying repeated behavior,
Mhm.
intentional, and power-based. Can that also come from women? Can
Yeah,
women
absolutely.
actually abuse men? And again, what is the difference between domestic violence and bullying, or is it similar?
It is similar. However, domestic violence is specifically defined as a romantic partner that you live with. Um, it could be family violence, and it goes out to the father and how he treats the children, or the mother and how she treats the children. But domestic violence is specifically a romantic partner that you live with. But bullying, you know, it can have a lot of the same behaviors where you are the repeatedly picking on someone, or repeatedly putting them down, repeatedly physically hitting someone. So I think that bullying is something that I talk about in early prevention. I think it's 4th and 5th grade that we talk about it, because it is important to kind of catch that behavior and have the kids self-reflect on it at a young age. It's, why am I doing this? And half the time it is something's going on at home, you know. There's something where the child feels powerless to it. But if I go to school and I get to pick on Timmy, like, I have power over that and I feel that. So that's something that I talk about with the kids at school a lot. And I always give them my information. I give them my number. I give them ways to contact me. I'm like, listen, it's okay that if you're feeling this way, and it's okay that if you need somebody to talk to about this stuff, it's not okay for you to come to school and take out what's going on at home on Timmy or whoever. And, you know, that does not have gender to it. I have been reading a lot of studies where women are being reported more as perpetrators in domestic violence in the last few years. I think the issue in the past was maybe there weren't enough men reporting it, because again, these are numbers that are reported. So that doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't women in the past that were doing it, but as we are moving into this new age, we are seeing more and more women who are becoming perpetrators and who are having to go through FFIP classes, or who are having to, you know, go to jail or whatever for their actions and are being held accountable for it. So it doesn't necessarily have an age. Yes, men are widely a larger portion of the perpetrators, but we are seeing an increase of women in the perpetrator category.
I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but in bullying prevention, it throws people new information and they're surprised about the question. And a question I love to ask people is, do they think that the person that's the perpetrator has a low self-esteem or high self-esteem? And through looking at research and being trained by one of the international people in the world, Dan Oveus from Norway, he has really good research that says the person that's the perpetrator actually has a high self-esteem. So I was wondering, in domestic violence, do you see that that the people, again, that the perpetrator, whether it's male or female, do you think that they actually feel good about what they're doing?
Honestly, I do. And it's really hard to get people to change when they have reached, I'm going to say 25 and up. It's really hard to get them to make that change and become self-aware if they haven't been doing that work, because a lot of times it could be narcissistic abuse that you're seeing. And, you know, these people get this kind of God complex from being able to belittle other people, you know, and being able to put them down. So they definitely don't have a low regard of themselves by any means. Because I mean, I've gotten a couple calls from abusers on the hotlines before, and I tell you what, they think very highly of themselves when they do call men and women. And they are constantly, you know, they threaten you, and they're like, I am in the right and I am always perfect and I don't know what's wrong with y'all. And it's just, it's a lack of self-awareness in my opinion, or it's just, there is, when you are raised by a narcissistic parent, there is a big percentage that it's going to rub off on you somehow, and you're going to learn those behaviors. So I think a lot of it is learned behaviors, and it is cyclical again, that they just don't understand how to change it, nor do they want to, because they're not self-aware enough to be able to do it. But yes, I agree. It is, a lot of them do have very high regard for themselves.
And Megan, you mentioned NOAA. If you can tell us what that stands for, where you work, and also what victims of domestic violence can do if they have a perpetrator in their home that is committing domestic violence, especially teenagers and teenage girls.
Yeah, of course. So NOAA stands for No One Alone. We are an organization. We cover Lumpkin and Dawson County. We work with victims of domestic violence. We have a shelter that houses women and children. We can take in underage children for 24 hours if there's something going on. But we are, you know, mandated reporters. So we would have to make a DFACS report and talk to DFACS and have a safety plan put in place if something's severe enough to where someone underage would be able to receive our services. But you do need parental consent. So it's really hard for teenage girls for us to be able to serve them, because I've ran into this experience recently. And it's just hard because there are laws in place. You have to be a certain age to be able to get, you have to be 18 to be able to receive any of our services without parental consent. So any age prior to that, you have to have parental consent. And a lot of times these young women, you know, they have DFACS cases that are going on. Their parents don't really care. So they're under the care of a guardian, but they don't really want to talk to their guardian about what's going on. So it can be a real hurdle. I know there is a hotline for teens who are experiencing domestic violence to call. And then there's also Rape Response is a really good resource that I give to people a lot. I'm trying to think of the name of the hotline for the teenagers. We can always be an ear to listen to for teenagers. I go and I talk to Dawson County every year about sexting and consent, which is, you would be surprised that a lot of them don't understand what consent is. Love is Respect is the name of the hotline for teenagers. And they have a 24-hour text line. They have a 24-hour chat line. I post it everywhere that I go, whenever I go to the high schools. I just went to Teen Maze last week, and I had a QR code that went straight to their phone so that they could have the hotline number. That is a big one. Has a lot of barriers to it. And I really think that there's something that needs to change so that we can help them more, other than just being like, here, call this hotline, you know, because a lot of times if you are underage, under the age of 16, and you are having consensual sex, even if both partners are under the age of 16 and they're doing this, you can get in trouble. You can go to jail. You can get arrested. And that is something that the kids are scared of. Maybe they are experiencing sexual abuse from a partner, but they're too scared to come forward because they don't want to get in trouble legally. So there are a lot of barriers that we're trying to figure out right now in that specific demographic, but I think eventually we will be able to figure it out. I mean, obviously 15 is really young age to be having a sexual relationship with your partner. But if you're going to be doing it, we need to figure out, safer ways or figure out how to help people who are experiencing sexual abuse at that age, because they don't want to come forward because they might get in trouble,
So when I think of domestic violence, I do think about the safety issue that you brought up, developing the safety plan. Interesting enough, in bullying prevention, also talk about a safety plan. Because if you know that it's happening in certain places in the school, for instance, if you know it's happening on the playground, which is a common place it's happening, then the question is, well, why are the teachers not seeing it? Well, maybe they're standing there looking and talking to their friend, or just not looking. And
Yeah.
then if you're looking for those places where they can't see things, then the kids know that they can do things behind a slide if they can't be seen. So again, developing a safety plan to me is so important in bullying prevention, but I think you hit it right on it, is when you think of domestic violence, creating a safety plan, maybe where it's going on in a home that's closed up. So I really like that idea of creating a safety plan.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another resource I gave my kids at the Teen Maze this past week, was a safety plan. And I made a PDF, had a QR code. I was like, this is something I didn't know about until I was older and I was in trouble and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, y'all don't have to use it. Just download it on your phone and forget about it. And then, later on when you're thinking about it, just look at it and it'll get you thinking, because I had a bunch of different scenarios about like what to do at school, like you were talking about, if someone's bullying you, or what to do at home if something is going on, or what to do in romantic relationships. So there were all these different thoughts on safety plans that really got the kids thinking. So if they took anything from that, I really hope they took the safety plan with them, because like you said, it's so important.
Well, Megan, your website is noonealone.org, NOONE alone.org, correct?
Correct. Yes.
No One Alone. And then the Domestic Violence National Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. So as we wrap up, tell us something unique about yourself. You and my co-host have something in common. Both grew up passionate Tennessee Volunteer fans, and
Yeah.
Dr. Carpenter Mike is a UT grad.
Yeah, I actually in high school wanted to go to UT because I was pre-med in college, and I love the cadaver farm that they have there. I grew up going to sports camps there, so Rocky Top is my fight song. I actually ended up going to school in North Carolina, but then transferring back to UNG in Dahlonega to finish up because my grandma had cancer and I just wanted to be closer to home. But I actually cheered in college too, so I found that out about you the other day, that you got to cheer in college, and I thought that was awesome.
Well, being a gymnast, it fits real well into that tumbling aspect of all that.
Yes.
The orange and white, when I see people what they wear, and if they wear the yellow orange, and we know that that's UT, darker orange, we know it's UT in Texas, University of Texas. But being, growing up in Knoxville, if it wasn't for the University of Tennessee, it probably wouldn't have much to do there. But because of bringing in people to a large university there, it was a fun place to be there. And again, knowing that I could go to a university and my parents didn't know what that was all about. It was, University of Tennessee or nothing. So I think University of Tennessee is something, and it's a big university. And one of the larger stadiums is Brian is a football and sports guy. They have a pretty big place up there, right, Brian?
That's right. I'll say go Dogs, but I'll also say go SEC.
Well, we had a dog. We had a dog too, didn't we, Megan?
Yeah,
It's called
we did.
Smoky.
The Blue Tick Hound.
Yes, yes. So it's a great experience and everything. So the passion for, I guess, being at a university and enjoying that, and the passion that you have in your job working with domestic violence, we really appreciate different people coming from different areas being part of a community where we're trying to look at not only drug use, but things like domestic violence, bullying, lots of issues kind of wrap around each other. Is that what you're agreeing with too, Megan?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you see this huge cycle of the abuse going on or the bullying going on, and then abuse is a huge risk factor of that. And then it doesn't necessarily correlation, it's not causation, but you know, it is a huge risk factor that you see correlated with all of these things. So maybe it is causing something. So we would have to do a more in-depth study of it, but it's something that it definitely is causing more issues when you get into it, you know?
And I would like to leave with two things, since alcohol is being brought up again, that came from these articles that I was looking at. And it says that the human brain is more vulnerable in adolescence to alcohol in adolescence because of the brain development. And raising the drinking age to 21 has probably saved tens of thousands of lives. And the last one is that alcohol is a carcinogen. So it does cause, it's a factor in cancer. And 15% of breast cancer causes in the United States are because of alcohol. So we're very concerned with healthy behavior, and domestic violence is one of those unhealthy behaviors. And so we're so glad that you are doing what you're doing, and especially going to schools and trying to do true prevention by working with the young kids in Dawson County and Lumpkin County.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're so glad that we have a attention toward all ages. We know it can affect all ages. And we know that even, Brian, even in universities with sports teams and things, I think there's some in any domestic violence going on in relationships with powerful football players or athletes.
Yeah, unfortunately, you do read about that a lot. I don't know the stats off the top of my head. If you might know, Megan.
No, I don't know any stats off the top of my head, but you know, you do see about it every now and again. There was one recently, I cannot remember his name, that just happened. But yeah, it is unfortunate. And I think it does kind of tie into the whole power and control thing that we were talking about, and a lot of what we're talking about with you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and it doesn't really matter what socioeconomic status you're from, you know, it can happen to you regardless.
Definitely. And before we close out, Mike, I did want to mention our text back campaign for parents and students. If you text LIST and listen to 85775, that's the Drug Free Lumpkin text back campaign, and you'll receive weekly tips on prevention activities. So I highly suggest that. Also, you can go to drugfreelumpkin.org. That's drugfreelumpkin.org. And I'll turn it over to you, Mike, to close us out.
Okay. Well, again, Megan, because of people like yourself and us working together as a team, we can make a difference, but working alone, we can't. And we have 12, I think the feds call, or that there's like 12 sector representatives in a community that we need to pull in, whether it's faith community or the law enforcement or businesses. So we're so excited for the work that you're doing, and thank you for joining us in our work group. And we meet monthly trying to, again, have a great prevention plan and developing strategies to decrease drug use. And I like the word healthy community. So I think what we're really trying to do is create a healthy community. So Megan, thank you for what you're doing. And we hope that we can continue working with each other and finding ways in which we all can be part of the same solution. So, Brian, thank you for leading us into this and pulling in Megan. And we hope that we will continue finding ways that we can help families. And what a great thing to do and feel good about as we continue through our lives. And I think it sounds like our best focus a lot of times is working with young kids to start with. So starting with those elementary kids, working through those relationships. So been a wonderful time. Thank you, audience. And we hope that if you want to contact us, this will be put on YouTube. Brian, any last words?
Just thank you again, both. Thank you for your insight, Megan, and just your passion for this. The community is very lucky to have you. And thank you to everyone. We'll see you next time.